I never wanted to make a scene. That was always his thing. The auditorium buzzed with applause as our daughter, Clara, crossed the stage valedictorian. Full scholarship, perfect GPA. I was holding my phone, trembling slightly, trying to record the moment without crying. Then, out of nowhere, Daniel leaned close to my ear and whispered, "I'm leaving you. Tonight, I've been seeing someone. Don't make a scene." The words were surgical, precise, practiced. I turned, stunned. He wasn't looking at me, he was smiling for the cameras, waving at Clara like the proud father he pretended to be. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I swallowed the scream. That rose inside me like acid. It gets worse. Later that evening, during Clara's graduation dinner at our home surrounded by friends, family, her old piano teacher, even my mother-in-law, he stood up to make a toast. I thought he was going to celebrate Clara. Instead, he clinked his glass and declared, "I'm leaving this marriage. I found someone who truly understands me. Clara, I'll always be your dad, but I'm moving out tomorrow." I wanted everyone to hear it from me. There were gasps. One of my sisters dropped her fork. Clara burst into tears and ran upstairs. And me, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, looked him dead in the eye, and whispered, "Okay." He thought that was the end, that I'd retreat into silence, into shame, but what he didn't know, that night something woke up inside me, and soon he'd wish he'd never tried to humiliate me at all, because silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. My name is Grace Delaney, and for the longest time, I believed in quiet lives and steady love. I come from a small town tucked in the folds of Vermont, the kind of place where the postman knows your dog's name and nobody locks their doors in summer. I grew up surrounded by maples and poetry, raised by a mother who always kept too many books on the kitchen table and a father who fixed things in silence fences, faucets, moods. I became a literature teacher at the same high school I once attended. I taught Shakespeare and Frost, handed out paperbacks like candy, and reminded my students that words, when chosen well, can change everything. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. That was the kind of woman I was, measured, dependable, soft but not weak. A candle, not a flame. And then there was Daniel. We met at a town fundraiser, of all places. He was charming in a way that made you feel seen. He made big gestures, flowers delivered to my classroom, notes tucked into my coat pocket, spontaneous. Road trips in his worn-down Jeep. He told me I was unlike anyone he'd ever met. And I believed him. When we married, I wore my mother's veil, and he cried before I even walked down the aisle. We moved into a craftsman house on the edge of town, white shutters, red door, a lilac tree in the front yard. The kind of house that felt like a promise. A forever. Our daughter, Clara, was born 3 years later. The world shifted the moment I held her. Daniel held her too, smiling like he'd just caught a falling star. We had traditions, movie nights every Friday with burnt popcorn, Sunday pancakes shaped like animals, gratitude jars on New Year's Eve. Daniel used to joke that I was the memory keeper of the family. I captured everything: photos, journal entries, birthday cards tucked in drawers. I wanted to remember it all, to preserve what felt too good to ever lose. And for a while, everything did feel good. Not perfect, nothing ever is, but full, real. We have friends who visited for wine and fire pits. He coached Clara's soccer team. I ran the parent-teacher bake sale. There were arguments, of course, money, time, missed anniversaries, but they ended with apologies and late-night TV reruns. I used to think love was mostly maintenance. You kept showing up. You forgave small things. You didn't throw away years just because something cracked, but now I realize cracks don't always appear overnight. Sometimes they start like hairlines, nearly invisible, and by the time you see them, The damage is already done. Daniel's job grew more demanding. He worked for a regional real estate development firm, and soon enough, he was traveling more, attending networking dinners, hosting late calls. At first, I supported him. I believed in his ambition. I packed his travel bags with tiny notes that said, "Come home safe." Clara misses her hero. But something shifted. He started coming home distracted. Cold sometimes. Irritated by small things, too much noise. Clara's endless stories about her classes, even the way I arranged dinner on the table. He blamed it on stress. I blamed it on myself. Still, I held the family together like I always did. Smoothed over the awkward silences at dinner. Made excuses when Clara asked why Dad didn't come to her school play. Told myself it was a season, not a storm, because that's what we do, don't we? Women like me, we stay. We try harder. We patch what's broken until our hands bleed. I remember one night, maybe a year before everything collapsed. We were lying. In bed, backs to each other, the silence so loud it buzzed. I turned and whispered, "Are we okay?" He didn't answer. I think that was my answer, but I stayed. For Clara, for the house, for the ghost of who we used to be, and deep down, for the idea that love, even tired love, deserved one more try. That was the life. I lived simple, steady, threaded with quiet hope, and I would have stayed in it, blindly, faithfully, if Daniel hadn't stood up at Clara's graduation dinner and shattered it all. But the thing about quiet women, when they break, they don't scream, they rebuild, and they remember everything. It didn't happen all at once. No affair ever does, at least. Not the kind that starts in boardrooms and ends in whispers. It creeps in like mildew behind a freshly painted wall. You don't see it, not right away, but you feel it. You smell it in the air, something rotten, sour. Wrong. It started with glances, not at me, but away from me. At dinner, Daniel's eyes no longer met mine. He'd scroll his phone instead, laughing quietly at texts he never explained. I remember once on Clara's birthday, I leaned over to ask if he liked the lemon cake I made, his favorite. He looked up from his screen, blinked, and said, "What?" As if I had interrupted something important. That night, I saw a message pop up when he left his phone on the counter. Still thinking about last night. No name. Just a heart. I froze. I could have asked, could have shouted. But instead, I wiped my hands on a towel and went to check if Clara had brushed her teeth. Denial is a powerful drug, especially when you've built a life around someone. Then came the excuses. I have a late dinner with a client. This project's big. I need to travel more. We're launching a new site, might be pulling all-nighters. He wasn't lying, not technically, but truth can be slippery. He gave me pieces, never the whole picture, and I accepted them because I still believed in us. In him, in the man who once drove 4 hours in the snow just to leave a single rose on my classroom desk. But I started noticing more. The shirts that smelled of unfamiliar perfume, the way he showered the moment he walked through the door, the new cologne he never wore around me. One evening, he came home distracted and set his keys on the kitchen counter, except they weren't his keys. Not completely. Attached was a hotel key card. He noticed too late. Saw my eyes start down to it. He picked it up quickly and said, "Old client meeting." No further explanation. I nodded. I stirred the soup. But that night, I sat on the bathroom floor after Clara went to sleep, wrapped in a towel, and stared at my reflection. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared. It was around this time I started asking gentle questions. I asked him how work was. He'd say, "Fine," and walk away. I asked if he was okay. He replied, "I'm tired," and scrolled his phone. I asked if he wanted to plan something for our anniversary. He said, "Can we skip it this year? Things are tight." Things were always tight. Money, time, affection, except somehow. There was always time for his new watch, always money for his spontaneous trips to networking events. Then one night, my sister Megan came over while Daniel was out late again. She poured us 2 glasses of wine and sat across from me like she was about to deliver bad news. I saw him, she said softly. My heart did that awful lurch. That mix of dread and confirmation. She told me she spotted him 2 weeks ago in Burlington hand in hand with a woman who wasn't me. Blonde, elegant, laughing like she belonged in his life. My first instinct? I told Megan she was wrong. I defended him. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe you saw it wrong. She didn't argue. She just looked at me with those sad, knowing eyes. The kind women give each other when they've seen this story unfold. Too many times. Later that night, I opened Daniel's laptop while he was asleep. I didn't even have to guess the password. Clara's birthday. That irony stung. In his browser history, hotel searches, dinner reservations, a Pinterest board titled Lake House Remodel Ideas under an account that didn't belong to me. But the final straw wasn't any of that. It was Clara. She came home from school one day, threw her backpack down and asked, "Is Dad mad at me?" I froze mid-dishwashing. Why would you say that, sweetheart? Because he's always on his phone when I talk to him. And when I told him I got an A on my science paper, he just said cool and walked away. I dried my hands and hugged her hard. Because what Daniel didn't understand was that neglect doesn't only break wives. It bruises daughters. Still, I didn't say anything, not yet, because some women scream when they're betrayed. Others start listening, watching, preparing, and the more I watched, the more I realized he was already gone. But if he thought he could humiliate me and walk away clean, he didn't know me at all. Graduation day should have been a triumph. Clara had worked harder than anyone I knew. Late nights with coffee and textbooks, science fairs, debate club, scholarships. She had her father's sharp mind and, despite everything, his hunger to win. But she also had my heart. She cried over sick birds, stayed after class to help younger students, read poetry when the world got too loud. That day, she wore her cap with the tassel tilted just so, and her gown hung awkwardly on her tiny frame. I remember her glancing back at me as she lined up to walk the stage, her smile bright and nervous. I gave her a thumbs up and mouthed, "You've got this." It was supposed to be her day. But Daniel, he made it his moment. I was filming her walk across the stage when I felt his breath on my neck. "I'm leaving you." I blinked, certain I misheard him. He didn't flinch. His voice was low, steady, rehearsed. "I've been seeing someone. I'm moving out tomorrow. Don't make a scene." I turned to him slowly, still holding my phone in the air, the screen shaking. He wasn't even looking at me. He was smiling, waving, as if nothing had happened. In that moment, something split inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just froze. That night, we hosted Clara's graduation dinner. Our backyard was strung with fairy lights, and the smell of grilled vegetables drifted through the warm June air. Clara wore a yellow sundress. Her friends lounged on the grass. I had spent days preparing made her favorite lemon pasta, her favorite sparkling raspberry lemonade. I should have known Daniel was going to ruin it. He tapped his glass. The sound was delicate, deliberate. Everyone turned to him, expecting some fatherly toast. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "I want to say something important tonight." Clara beamed. My stomach dropped. He went on, "Clara, you've made me so proud, but life is short, and sometimes we have to make hard choices. I've fallen in love with someone else. I'm leaving this marriage. Starting tomorrow, I'll be living separately. I wanted everyone here to know I believe in honesty." Honesty? My daughter's smile collapsed into confusion. Then panic. Then tears. She ran from the table, her sobs cutting through the stunned silence like glass. No one moved. Not at first. His mother stared down at her plate. My sister opened her mouth, then closed it again. Daniel just stood there, holding his champagne like he was making a toast to a new beginning. I stood, quietly walked over to him, leaned in close, and said, "You will regret this." That was all. No theatrics. No slaps, no begging, just 7 syllables. Soft, precise, lethal. He blinked like I'd struck him. But I walked away before he could answer. Later that night, after everyone had awkwardly left, after Clara had cried herself to sleep, I went into our study. The room still smelled like the old cedar desk we bought at that antique market in Montpelier. The one he said made him feel important. The desk he never let me touch. I opened it. I found a file tucked in the back drawer labeled Vermont Holdings. Inside were documents, investment plans, business forecasts, property transfers. One stood out, a signed letter of intent to merge with a boutique real estate firm led by Rebecca Langford, the woman from his texts. From the hotel. And then the twist that would change everything. Buried inside the documents was a note, handwritten by Daniel, addressed to her. Once the merger clears and the divorce is done, we'll be unstoppable. So it wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. He had timed it perfectly. Humiliate me in public, make a clean break, and slide into a shiny new life without consequence. But he underestimated something. He thought I was the kind of woman who disappeared, that I would fade into pity and whispered gossip. But what he didn't know, what he never bothered to learn, is that I've spent my entire life studying stories. I know what makes a villain. I know what makes a plot twist, and I know exactly how to rewrite an ending. That night, I closed the file, poured myself a glass of wine, and stood in the dark, watching the garden sway in the wind. It was no longer about heartbreak. It was about strategy. He wanted to build a new empire, but I was about to take the ground out from under him. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the corner of our study, the same room where Daniel had been secretly sketching out a future that didn't include me, and watched the sun crawl across the window pane, bleeding light over every lie he had filed away. For most people, betrayal sparks rage, but for me, it sparked focus. Clara was still asleep, her door gently shut. The house was so quiet, it felt suspended, like time itself had paused to let me think. I took another sip of wine, then picked up the pen Daniel had left on his desk. It was monogrammed with his initials. That made me laugh. He always thought branding made him powerful. I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled Rebecca Langford. Her face was everywhere. Magazine covers, podcast interviews, LinkedIn posts titled things like "Why Women Should Build Empires Together." Oh, the irony. She ran a boutique real estate firm called RLA Group, sleek, polished, shiny, based in Burlington. And according to Daniel's documents, they were days away from finalizing a merger that would make them one of the most influential luxury housing developers in Vermont. The paperwork in that drawer, it wasn't just business strategy. It was a roadmap. And I now had every detail of it, but I didn't storm into his office the next day, didn't call lawyers or scream across the dinner table. I smiled when he told me he'd be gone a few nights this week, work stuff. I even handed him his suitcase. He was relieved, I could tell. He mistook my silence for surrender, but I wasn't folding, I was positioning. That week, I reached out to an old friend, Ava Malone. We went to college together, both English majors, both poor and hungry and brilliant, but Ava had taken a different path. While I built a family, she built a name. She now ran an angel investment group that specialized in rescuing small firms from mergers that would gut them. I told her everything. She didn't flinch. "You want in?" She asked. I nodded. "Then we do this right, under the radar. Like a ghost." We started meeting quietly early mornings at coffee shops outside of town, late night Zoom calls while Clara slept. I used a pseudonym, Lily Grant. Under that name, I applied for a fast-track business mentorship program run by Ava's firm. I told Daniel I was working on a teachers' union project. He didn't ask for details. He never really listened anyway. The program was intense. I learned about acquisitions, silent partnerships, financial redirections. It was like learning a second language, and I was fluent within weeks. Turns out literature teaches you how to read people. And Daniel? He was an open book. Every move he made, I predicted. Every contact he reached out to. I tracked. Every piece of property he touched. I found the weak spot. And then I discovered something beautiful. One of the companies, RLA Group, had approached Meteridge Estates, a charming little family-run property development firm near Lake Champlain, was struggling. They were wary of the merger, afraid they'd be swallowed up and rebranded. They didn't want a corporate empire. They wanted legacy. I offered them both. As Lily Grant, I approached them with Ava's team backing me. I offered to purchase 51% of their shares, allowing them to maintain operations under their own name while I quietly held control. It wasn't about money. It was about leverage. Daniel and Rebecca had already factored Meteridge into their projected profits. They were counting on it. The papers in Daniel's drawer mentioned it specifically, which meant when they tried to finalize their merger and found out that Meteridge was no longer available because it was already partially owned by a private investor who had no intention of selling, the entire house of cards would collapse. I had one final hurdle. The charity gala. It was a local tradition each year. The biggest business names in Vermont gathered at the Elmwood Hall to donate, socialize, and posture. Daniel was set to go public with his new relationship and his upcoming merger. Rebecca would be there. Press would be there, and I would be there too. Not as his wife, not even as Grace Delaney, but as Lily Grant. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I would only need to sign my name. The gala was held at Elmwood Hall, a historic mansion turned event space that practically reeked of old money and new ambition. Chandeliers flickered above tables dressed in velvet and gold. Champagne flutes caught the light like camera flashes. And everyone in the room was wearing some version of a mask. Polite smiles, ambitious eyes, curated charm. I stepped out of the black car alone, in a midnight blue dress that didn't scream for attention but didn't fade into the background either. The neckline was soft, the fabric flowed like water, and around my wrist was a thin silver cuff, engraved with a single word, Lily. Daniel was already inside. I spotted him near the center of the ballroom, his arm looped around her. Rebecca Langford. She was as sleek as her brand image white jumpsuit, sharp bob, that smug expression successful people wear when they believe nothing can touch them. They were exactly where they wanted to be, at the center of everything, laughing, toasting, whispering into the right ears. I watched Daniel speak with a few major investors, gesturing confidently, the practiced alpha male charisma on full display. He hadn't seen me yet. Perfect. I moved through the room like a shadow polished, unreadable and invisible to him. I chatted briefly with Ava, who gave me a slight nod. Everything was in place. The schedule was tight. The Meteridge acquisition had finalized just 48 hours ago. The paperwork was fresh, legal, unquestionable, and perfectly timed. The event's MC took the mic to announce the evening's major speech, Daniel Delaney and Rebecca Langford's Future of Vermont Real Estate, PRESENTATILN. I watched them approach the stage, Rebecca taking the lead with that airy, calculated confidence. Daniel followed like the loyal understudy. They were smiling. So sure. Rebecca began. We're thrilled to announce a new venture, a Merger that will redefine how luxury homes are designed and sold in Vermont. With the Meadow Estates project joining our portfolio, she stopped. Her eyes flicked to someone offstage. Confused murmurs began. A man in a headset whispered something to the MC. Daniel turned toward Rebecca, his brows furrowed. More whispers. A few attendees pulled out their phones, and then came the sound I had been waiting for. A ripple of realization. Someone gasped. The MC returned to the microphone, clearly rattled. Apologies, but we've just been informed. There seems to be a change in ownership regarding Meadow Estates. The merger has been paused. Paused. Such a polite word for obliterated. Daniel's face drained of color. Rebecca leaned toward him, her voice caught on the mic. What the hell is going on? Then across the ballroom, Ava raised her glass. Slowly, silently, I stepped forward. Not toward the stage, toward a long table set for major donors. I placed a leather folder on the white linen. Inside, proof of my acquisition, signed, notarized. UNCONTESTABL. My name was listed as Lily Grant, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakably mine, Grace All Delaney. And then he saw me across the room. Daniel's eyes locked onto mine. It took him a second, 2, 3. Then came the shock, the confusion. And finally, the scream. He pushed past chairs, shouldered through guests, almost knocked over a server. His voice cracked like thunder across the ballroom. What did you do? People turned, phones came out, flashlights, camera clicks, open mouths. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, calm, collected, my hands clasped in front of me. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You built a future on stolen land. I just bought it out from under you." Rebecca stormed past him, already dialing her phone. Her heels clicked like gunshots. She didn't even look back. Daniel was panting, sweating now, stammering something about legal action, betrayal, manipulation, but no one was listening. He had made such a show of winning, of parading his new life, his new love, his new empire. And in one evening, I'd taken it all without raising my voice. I left before the meltdown fully bloomed. Didn't need to stay and watch him burn. I walked out into the cold Vermont air, the wind soft against my skin. Behind me, the mansion buzzed with chaos. Ahead of me, silence. The good kind, the victorious kind. It's funny how silence feels different after revenge. Before, it was the sound of something missing, a presence gone, an ache unanswered. Now, it's the sound of space, of peace, of finally hearing myself think. 2 months after the gala, Daniel moved out of state, quietly. No farewell party, no teary goodbye to Clara, just a short, bitter email to finalize what little was left to split. The last thing he wrote was, "I hope it was worth it." I never replied because it wasn't about worth. It was about truth and reclaiming a version of myself I had buried beneath dinner tables and folded laundry and late-night apologies for things I didn't even do wrong. Rebecca, from what I hear, tried to salvage the merger, but with Meadow off the table, the deal collapsed. Investors pulled out. She stepped down 2 weeks later, citing personal reasons. I saw a photo of her on a real estate blog, walking alone into a black car. No smiles, no speeches. Just the beginning of a quiet exit, and me? I didn't go back to being just Grace, the high school English teacher who waited at home while someone else built their life. I stayed in the shadows for a while, watching the dust settle. Then I stepped fully into my own light, under the name Lily Grant. I continued investing quietly, wisely, in companies run by women who reminded me of myself before I knew what power felt like. I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to be free. Clara chose to stay with me full time. We didn't talk much about her father, except once, when she found me working late at the kitchen table and asked, "Did he ever really love you?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, "Love and loyalty aren't the same thing, sweetheart. But I learned that the hard way, so you wouldn't have to." She nodded, then hugged me hard, and that was enough. We planted new flowers that spring. Ripped out the old bushes Daniel always promised to trim, but never did. Clara chose sunflowers. I chose lavender. The yard felt different, lighter, like it could finally breathe. One evening in July, I poured a glass of red wine and walked to the garden alone. The air was still and warm, and the sky was that soft, bruised pink Vermont does better than any place I've ever known. I sat on the bench under the lilac tree, the same tree Daniel once proposed beneath, and pulled out a conte, small leather-bound notebook. The pages were filled with poems I had written during the darkest nights of our unraveling. Not angry poems, not petty ones, but poems of transformation, of stillness, of power, discovered late. But not too late. In that moment, I realized something. He had tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved, but in the end, he humiliated only himself. He gave a monologue. I built a plot. He performed. I planned. He screamed. I signed. And now, he was a footnote, not a wound, not even a villain. Just a lesson, the final one he'd ever teach me. They say revenge is loud, messy, explosive, but sometimes it's just a quiet signature on the right paper at the right time. Some betrayals leave scars. Others, they leave a silence so powerful, you never want to feel it again. Not all endings are loud. Some are quiet, some are mine. If you're still here, you already know.